So our first presentation this morning is going to be about the energy transition in Ghana. And that presentation is going to be given by Mr. Wisdom Togobo. So, Wisdom, if I could ask you to come to the stage, sir, please join me in welcoming him.
As you can see, my name is Wisdom Togobo. I'd worked with the Ministry of Energy for some time as the Director for Renewable and Nuclear Energy for close to 12 years. Before moving to the Bui Power Authority, where I acted as the Director for Renewables there. But currently, I'm on retirement and I run my own small consultancy company. To go straight, you will agree with me that no country can develop economically without access to modern fuels. If you want to develop, if you want to industrialize, you need modern fuels, and the fuels should come cheap. Because if the fuel is expensive, you will not be able to compete. And the backbone of any industrial activity is the availability of cheap power. But we must also understand that the cheaper you go, the more the environment is destroyed. You all agree with me that until the mid-19th, we were all relying on renewable energy for most of our activities. We use biomass and coal for cooking and combustion. We use wind for milling, and mechanical power we use human and animal power. But when electricity was introduced and we had to use coal to burn power, you realize that we ended up emitting so much carbon dioxide, and that is what has led to the situation we are facing now, which we call climate change, global warming, and the need for energy transition. You also see from the graph, as you realize, this is how the trend went in. You can see that for a long time, we were using coal, small coal, biomass, charcoal, until the 80s when gas was discovered and oil was discovered. And you can see the rate at which the whole world is burning fuel and contributing to CO2 emissions. And the situation is what has led to what today we call energy transition. And if we talk about energy transition, nuclear emits no carbon dioxide. So nuclear has, the opportunity to transition to minimize our emissions. Renewable energy, we all know, is an environmentally friendly option. Today, even though methane gas, natural gas, emits CO2, compared to liquid fuels, it is termed to be a less dangerous, or it emits less gas than oil. This graph just shows where nuclear plants are installed. And show me a country with at least one nuclear power plant, and I can tell you that that country is industrialized. Yes, look at it. Where do we have the nuclear power plants? You can see in the US, in the whole of Europe, go towards the Asia, Japan, Korea, China, portions of India, and the whole of Africa. We have only one nuclear power plant, and that is in South Africa. It is therefore not surprising that South Africa is the only industrialized country on the continent. That's the only place you can see a lot of industrial activities taking place. You also notice that Africa abounds with so much natural resources. We have the diamond, we have the copper, we have the coal. Just mention it. You can find all these things in Africa. And again, in Africa, our land is also very fertile. Just dig a hole and put maize there, and in 3 days' time, you find it germinating, irrespective of the time. It tells you that we have all the resources we need to survive and not be hungry. And when it comes to energy, all the energy that is required to add value to our abundant mineral resources also abounds in Africa. We have the hydropower plants. Africa has exploited only 15% of our hydro resources. compared to 85% in Europe or in the US. We have natural gas. Most of them are still underdeveloped. We have petroleum products. In fact, if you count the top 5 of oil-producing countries, you can find one in Africa. We have the uranium to support nuclear activities. We have biomass. We have the solar. And so we have all that it takes to add value to our abundant natural resources. But why are we still poor? Why are we where we are? When it comes to carbon dioxide emissions, you can see from the graph, most African countries, our emissions are very, very low. Very, very low compared to Europe, China, Japan, etc. in terms of per capita emissions. Most countries in Africa have low CO2 emissions. And so what do? Our emissions are low. We have the coal. We have all the resources. Should we sit and say energy transition? Let's just sit and not add value to what we have. When we talk about greenhouse gas, energy transition, I think the issue is not necessarily Africa. Africa, we are still burning charcoal and wood. If you transition to gas, you emit more CO2. But we need this modern fuel to improve our lives, to improve the lives of women and children. We need these modern fuels. Our children need to also take advantage of the light, use the computers. And if you are to use electricity to produce this, you by all means will emit more CO2. And that is what we need. Go to the countryside. We are still using push tracks. Our women and children are sitting on trade cycle, motorbikes, etc. In terms of transportation, they are still carrying things over their head. If we are to transition to run on cars, which is modern, we will be emitting more CO2. Should we say that we shouldn't emit CO2 because China, America have destroyed the environment with too much emissions, so we should sit where we are? That is a question for us. Most industrialized countries have no resource of their own. I know Korea is represented here. What resource do they have? Germany, what resource do they have? They come and pick the resources in Africa. They pick your diamond, your gold. They add value to it. Even the value, they come for coal from Africa. Add value to it. And then they come and sell it back to us at a higher price. Korea takes oil from Nigeria. Crude oil. Takes it all the way to Korea. Refines it with their nuclear power plants to produce petrol and diesel. And they bring it back to us at a higher cost. What prevents us as Africa from uniting and adding value to the resources we have? It is about time Africa comes together. Why should we export raw cocoa beans only to import chocolate? Today, if you want the best ornaments, you have to go to Dubai to buy gold. Meanwhile, the gold is in Africa. It is about time we unite to come together and follow the same path that America, China, Europe, the same path that they've taken, so that we can add value to the abundant resources we have. If we don't do that, and we start competing among ourselves, we will be where we are, and the other countries will be leading the fall. In terms of cost, take a look at this graph. This is the energy production cost. You will see clearly that oil is the most expensive source of fuel for generating electricity. The cheapest is gas, coal, nuclear. If you have hydro, all the better. So it is therefore not surprising that most developed industrialized countries rely on coal, natural gas, and nuclear. This is the profile for USA. Let's take a look at Japan. You can see Japan uses mainly coal, nuclear, natural gas. After Fukushima disaster in 2012, nuclear came down. Go back to Japan today. The dependence on nuclear is increasing. Why? Because nuclear offers cheaper source of power. Take Korea. Look at Korea. In fact, if you compare the generation in 1990, Korea's power generation was less than half of that of Japan. But today, look at where they are. Same way, take Germany and India. Germany, as at 1990, their power demand was somewhere around 300, 250, thereabout. Indians have seen the secret in, generating cheap power from coal. It is therefore not surprising that today when you go to India, you find a lot of German companies migrating from Germany to India to produce there. And by doing so, job is created. Industrialization is taking place. It is about time Africa takes a clue from this and learn from it. Look at South Africa. South Africa, as at 1990, relied mainly on coal and nuclear. It was therefore not surprising that South Africa was the manufacturing base for Africa. But after apartheid, the dependence went down, down, down. Take Malaysia, for instance. They have also seen the secret in producing cheap power, and that is how come Malaysia is being industrialized. Malaysia took a conscious decision not to go coal, not to go nuclear, but they have decided to use cheap power, and the cheap power they are using is mainly from coal, natural gas, and hydropower. You can see their dependence on oil has been very minimal. Look at China. See the rate at which China is using coal. You can just imagine it. Yes, China in 2020, during the COVID alone, just 1 year, added 34 gigawatts of installed capacity, just from coal, just 1 year. And today, when we talk about nuclear, China is the world's largest producer of nuclear power. They have about 55 plants, and as we talk, 22 nuclear power plants are under construction, and they have in mind to install another 70 more nuclear power plants by the year 2030, just 6 years ahead. These informations are available on the net. You can all check up. Look at Ghana. We pride ourselves to have enough generation. But what is our capacity? Just around 5 gigawatts. China added 34 gigawatts in 1 year. Ghana, for over 50 years, we have only 5 gigawatts. And we say we have excess generation? No. So what are the key takeaways? Africa needs reliable power to develop. Natural gas, large hydros, clean coal, nuclear remains the most sustainable and cheaper energy options. And it is about time we come together to see how best we can take advantage of the abundant resource we have. Africa needs to follow the examples of China, India, and Malaysia if we want to add value to the abundant resources we have. If we want to add value to create more jobs so that our African brothers and sisters don't run to Europe and America in search of greener pastures. Africa, we need firm energy if we have to industrialize. You don't industrialize on the backbone of coal, solar and wind. Yes, they have a role to play, but we don't do that. It's like food. If you are hungry and there's no food, you can make do with watermelon and banana. But where you need energy to dig the ground, you need a heavy meal to be able to dig the ground. If Africa is to industrialize, we need the heavy mills. What Europe has done, we need the nuclear, we need the coal, we need the natural gas, we need the large hydros. This is what we need to industrialize Africa, not solar, not wind. Solar has a role to play, but industrialization, we need a heavy mill. Let's take Ghana, for instance. Ghana, this is our generation mix. Installed capacity, just around 5.4 megawatts. And if you look at our trend, the dependence, yes, dependence on residential consumption of electricity is on the increase. But take a look at the industrial sector. The increase is minimal. We have not done much as far as industry is concerned. We need to add value. If we take agric, the contribution of electricity in the agriculture sector and in the transport sector is almost negligible. But if we use cheap power from coal, cheap power from nuclear, cheap power from natural gas, we stand a chance to use this power to support irrigation, to support mechanization, and that is what will create the jobs and bring money into our pockets. If you have to use solar and wind, you may want to use a storage system, and that makes it more expensive. So let us focus on cheap power. If you look at the graph I showed, most of these industrialized countries signed the Paris Agreement in 2015. But between 2015 and now, you can see that they have all increased their consumption of coal and oil. And we are being told, don't increase coal, don't use coal, use solar, use wind. How can we develop, how can we industrialize on the backbone of this? However, well, the international community is calling all of us to transition. And Ghana is also committed to this transition. And because of that, we've prepared a national energy transition framework, which outlines the policy directions for the transition. And I believe that is the main subject for my presentation. These are the objectives of it: to identify viable pathways, harness the opportunities for fair and equitable transition, evaluate the impact of the transition, and then we develop medium to long-term targets. And in doing so, this is what Ghana's transition framework looked at. Yes, at the moment, our dependence is mainly on natural gas, and it is our plan, based on the Nuclear Power Ghana projections, that by 2030, we should be able to have our first nuclear power plant in operation. And we believe that if we do that, we'll increase, it will contribute 5% of our target coming from nuclear, where gas will be 70% and then renewable energy will be 26%. Currently, renewable energy is about 32, 33%, mainly from large hydro and solar. And our transition plan towards zero emission is to increase our dependence on nuclear. And this is how it is. We believe that by 2070, we'll have as much as 46% of our electricity generation coming from nuclear, 34% coming from natural gas, and 20% coming from renewable energy. This is what we could do. But if the countries that are pushing transition, UK is reactivating their coal power plants, Germany is destroying their wind turbines to mine coal under it. These are countries pushing energy transition. But they see the need for cheap power, and they are going ahead. Why nuclear power in Ghana? The decision was considered purely on economics. And this decision was taken as far back as 1963. But it was shelved until 2008, when a cabinet decision was taken for us to include nuclear in our energy mix. And since then, all efforts have been made, irrespective of the parties that are in power. They have all supported the drive for nuclear. Since 2008, we have 2009, nuclear was included in the energy policy scheme, and the Ghana Nuclear Power Organization was established. In 2017, when power was changed, the new government proceeded to establish the owner-operator organization, which I believe my colleagues here have said a lot about it. And clearly, you will see that nuclear is an agenda which is top priority for all governments, because that is the only way we can add value to our abundant resources. If you say we shouldn't use coal because it emits so much CO2, we have the nuclear. Go to Niger, uranium. We have the uranium in Africa. We don't need to go outside the continent to get the fuel we need to drive nuclear. And we should think about how do we push nuclear on our agenda. The only thing a lot of people say about nuclear is that how safe is it? How can we manage the waste? And we try to bother ourselves with it. It's like air travel. We all know that if you fly in the plane and there's an accident, probability of dying is almost 99%. But yet still, the air travel is considered the safest means of transport. Am I right? Yes, it's the safest means of transport. Why? Because the institutions have put in place the right regulatory framework to make sure that no mistake is taken. Yes, we had a lot of accidents. So far, we've had only 3 accidents, 3 nuclear disasters. The first one in the US, 1979. Then 1986, we had the Chernobyl one. And 2001, we had the Fukushima disaster. Just 3 accidents. But the International Atomic Energy Agency has put in place very tight, stringent measures to make sure that such disasters are not repeated. If you look at the loss of lives when it comes to nuclear, Chernobyl recorded 31 deaths, 2 of which were due to initial exposure, and the other ones were as a result of subsequent acute radiation sickness. But in the case of Fukushima, even though the earthquake claimed 20,000 lives, about 20,000 lives, only one, and I mean only one officially recognized death was a result of radiation exposure. However, additional 573 deaths occurred as a result of evacuation and movement of people. But in terms of radiation exposure, only one. That's the data from International Atomic Energy Agency. And what about the disaster in the US? 0. There were no deaths. So why will you say that nuclear is dangerous, nuclear is safe? And out of, as at 2021, out of the 667 nuclear power plants built since 1951, only 3 major accidents have occurred. How many road accidents do we find in our various countries? How many lives are lost due to road accidents? Do we say those who died from air crash, so you will not fly by air and you rather travel by sea? No. The official internationally recognized death statistics for the combined loss of lives for the 3 major nuclear accidents is only 32. Just 32. But I'll show you what happens in for the other generations. And so far, when we talk about the deaths per 1,000 terawatt hours for the energy options, I mean, nuclear tends to be the lowest. Look at coal, as much as 1 million deaths per 1,000 terawatt hours. The data is there for you to see. Even wind and solar, the number of deaths are more than nuclear. Nuclear is only 90. The data is available, you can easily check. If we talk about nuclear countries, countries that are leading in renewable energy, countries that are leading in solar and wind, first of all, hard nuclear power plants, you need a stable base load to allow the intermittencies and the variable renewables to play in. So you take United States, China, France, these are countries leading in nuclear. And it is not surprising that there are countries leading in the variable renewable energies. So if you don't have a stable base load, if you don't have the nuclear or natural gas or hydro as stable base load, and you want to focus on solar and wind, you destroy the grid. You destroy the grid and you will not have anything at all. So in conclusion, let me say that the Ministry of Energy in Ghana, or the government of Ghana, has put in place a robust energy transition framework towards achieving net zero. Renewable energy, including large hydro, natural gas, nuclear, will be the main transition fuel for the power sector. Policies and strategies have been put in place to make sure that industries get access to this reliable power once we are able to develop them. Nuclear power has the potential to provide affordable power to drive industrialization in Ghana. We all know the benefits. It's environmentally very friendly. It emits no natural gas. It is safe, and it has the lowest mortality rate. And like I said earlier on, the International Atomic Energy Agency has put in place strict regulatory measures to minimize future accidents. And it is about time all of us, including the media here present, take advantage of it to educate the masses on the benefits of nuclear, because that is one sure way of adding value to our energy scheme. And on this note, I want to say a very big thank you to you, but I want to urge African countries, this is not the time to compete among ourselves. Ghana is putting nuclear, the next country, Burkina Faso or Nigeria, is putting nuclear. Why can't we come together, plan it? You are giving me the resource. This country does coal, another country does nuclear, and we have a robust transmission network which will support industrialization in Africa. This is what we need. Thank you very much.